You expect me to believe you're a lawyer? That you're standing in my courtroom as an attorney?
That's correct, Your Honor.
The grand courtroom buzzed with murmurs as the heavy wooden doors swung open. A young black teenager, no older than 16, stepped in, his hands shoved into the pockets of his slightly oversized hoodie. His curly hair was unkempt, his sneakers scuffed, and his posture relaxed, too relaxed for a place like this. Judge Clarence Whitmore, a man known for his no-nonsense demeanor, adjusted his reading glasses and frowned. He was an old-school figure, strict, impatient, and, according to many, not particularly fond of people who didn't fit his idea of respectable. The courtroom grew silent as the teenager approached the defense table. He stood there, cool and unbothered, glancing around as if he had just wandered into the wrong room. The judge sighed and tapped his gavel twice. "Bailiff, what is this? Who let a child in here?" The bailiff, a burly man with a military-style haircut, glanced at the judge and then back at the boy. Your Honor, I believe he's here for the case." The audience chuckled, and Judge Whitmore shook his head. "What case? You mean the one where he's the defendant? What is this nonsense?" A smirk played at the teenager's lips. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a folded document, and placed it on the table. "Actually, Your Honor," he said, his voice calm and measured, "I'm here as legal counsel." The courtroom fell into stunned silence. Judge Whitmore's face twisted in disbelief before breaking into laughter, sharp, mocking laughter that echoed through the room. "Counsel? You?" The judge leaned forward, scanning the boy up and down. "You expect me to believe you're a lawyer? That you're standing in my courtroom as an attorney?" The teenager didn't flinch. He simply crossed his arms. "That's correct, Your Honor." The murmurs returned, louder this time. Reporters in the gallery exchanged curious glances, pens scratching against their notepads. Judge Whitmore scoffed. "This is the most ridiculous thing I've seen in my 30 years on the bench." He turned to the court clerk. "Someone find out what's going on. This must be some prank." The boy exhaled, then walked confidently toward the judge's bench. His gaze was sharp, unwavering. "Your Honor," he said, his voice carrying an eerie certainty, "if I prove my legitimacy, I expect an apology, publicly." The judge's laughter died instantly. His grip tightened on the gavel. "Fine, prove it." A slow smile spread across the teenager's face. "With pleasure. Do you agree with black young boy? Subscribe if you do." A tense silence filled the courtroom. All eyes were on the young teenager standing before Judge Whitmore, his confidence unwavering. The judge adjusted his glasses, staring at the boy like he was an illusion. "You're telling me you're a lawyer? Fine." He motioned to the court clerk. "Let's settle this now. What's your name, kid?" The teenager calmly stepped forward. "Malik Turner." His voice was steady, carrying a weight that made people listen. Judge Whitmore frowned. The name wasn't familiar. He turned to the clerk, who was already typing rapidly into her system. Seconds later, her eyes widened in shock. "Your Honor," she hesitated, double-checking the screen. "He's actually registered." The courtroom gasped. Even the bailiff took a step closer, as if he had misheard. Judge Whitmore scoffed. "And that proves nothing." Malik didn't even blink. "My client, Raymond Parker, is left-handed." The courtroom murmured. Miss Davenport's eyes narrowed. "That doesn't prove he's innocent. Plenty of people use both hands." Malik shrugged. "True, but let's take it a step further." He nodded to the bailiff. "Play the footage at half speed and zoom in on the gun." The bailiff hesitated but followed Malik's instructions. The video zoomed in on the suspect's grip. Malik folded his arms. "Your Honor, if you look closely, you'll notice the suspect has a tattoo on his wrist, a small flame symbol." Judge Whitmore leaned forward, adjusting his glasses. The jury did the same. And then they saw it. A small, barely visible flame tattoo on the masked robber's wrist. Malik turned to the courtroom. "Ladies and gentlemen, my client Raymond Parker does not have a tattoo." Gasps echoed through the room. Miss Davenport's face paled. Malik grinned. "Your Honor, I move to dismiss all charges immediately." Judge Whitmore stared at the screen, then at Malik. He was beginning to realize something. This wasn't just some kid pretending to be a lawyer. This was a genius at work. To be continued. "Have you subscribed? Kindly hit the subscribe button." For a moment, the entire courtroom sat in stunned silence. Then whispers erupted like wildfire. Did he just prove that? There's no way a kid caught that, and the prosecution didn't. That tattoo wasn't in the case file. Judge Whitmore's face twitched with frustration. He slammed his gavel. Order. I will have order in this court. The murmuring died down, but the tension remained thick. Miss Davenport's expression had shifted. Just minutes ago, she had been brimming with confidence. Now, she looked shaken. She cleared her throat. Your Honor, while this is an unexpected revelation, it does not automatically exonerate the defendant. The police still found him running near the crime scene with a weapon matching the one in the footage. Malik smirked. I was hoping you'd say that. He turned to his client, Raymond Parker, who had been sitting in stunned silence the entire time. Malik reached into his briefcase and pulled out a document, striding confidently to the evidence table. Let's talk about that matching weapon, shall we? He held up a forensic report. This is the ballistics report on the gun found in my client's possession. You know what it proves? Miss Davenport folded her arms. That the gun matches the one in the robbery. Malik grinned. Wrong. He turned the paper around for the jury to see. The bullet casings at the crime scene do not match my client's gun. In fact, this gun was never even fired that night. A ripple of shock moved through the courtroom. Judge Whitmore snatched the report from the bailiff and skimmed through it, his frown deepening. This can't be right. Malik tilted his head. Did the prosecution fail to read their own forensic report? Miss Davenport's face was turning red. That gun was still found in his possession. Malik held up a hand. Let me guess. You're about to say that even if my client didn't fire the gun, he could have been planning to commit a crime? She hesitated. That's exactly what I'm saying. Malik turned to the jury, gesturing dramatically. Ladies and gentlemen, the prosecution is no longer proving their case. They're just throwing out possibilities. But last I checked, we don't convict people based on what-ifs. A few jury members nodded. Miss Davenport's confidence was slipping. The police found him running from the scene. Why would an innocent man run? Malik chuckled. Great question. Let's ask him. He turned to Raymond Parker. Mr. Parker, tell the court why you were running that night. Raymond hesitated, his voice hoarse from nerves. I was running because I heard gunshots. Malik nodded. And why were you near the crime scene? Raymond cleared his throat. I was on my way home from work. I work as a janitor at the school 3 blocks down. Malik turned to Miss Davenport. Did the prosecution bother to confirm his alibi? Silence. Judge Whitmore raised an eyebrow. Miss Davenport? The prosecutor hesitated. Then, reluctantly, she said, We assumed he had no alibi. Gasps. Malik let the moment linger before speaking again. So let me get this straight. You arrested my client, ignored the fact that the real robber had a tattoo, dismissed a ballistics report that proved his gun wasn't fired, and never even checked his alibi? Silence. Then Malik shrugged. Your Honor, at this point, I shouldn't even have to ask, but for the sake of formalities. He walked back to his table and placed his hands on the desk. The defense moves to dismiss all charges. Judge Whitmore clenched his jaw. He glanced at Miss Davenport, who had no response. The judge exhaled, rubbing his temple. Finally, he looked up. Case dismissed. The courtroom exploded. Reporters scrambled to capture the moment. The bailiff struggled to keep order as murmurs and gasps rippled through the audience. Raymond Parker let out a shaky breath, his hands gripping the table in disbelief. Malik? He simply leaned back in his chair, completely unbothered, as if he had just won a casual game of chess instead of a high-profile case. Judge Whitmore banged his gavel. Order. I will have order in this courtroom. Slowly, the noise died down. The judge turned his gaze toward Malik, his expression unreadable. Mr. Turner, approach the bench. Malik's smirk never wavered. He stood up, straightened his hoodie, and strolled toward the judge with an air of confidence that unsettled nearly everyone watching. Whitmore leaned forward, lowering his voice. I don't know who you think you are, but this is my courtroom. You just made a fool out of my prosecution. Malik tilted his head. With all due respect, Your Honor, I didn't make a fool out of them. They did that all on their own. The judge's nostrils flared. Watch yourself, kid. Malik held his gaze. I'm not a kid. I'm an attorney, a licensed one, whether you like it or not. For a moment, the two stared at each other, an old judge used to authority and a young genius who didn't bow to it. Then, Whitmore sighed and sat back. How did you even get here? Malik raised an eyebrow. You mean, how did I become an attorney at 16? The judge nodded. I've been on the bench for 30 years. I've seen a lot of things, but this... He shook his head. I've never seen anything like you. Malik crossed his arms. Then maybe it's time you start seeing more people like me. Judge Whitmore frowned. Meaning? Malik's smirk faded slightly, his tone turning serious. Meaning, people like me don't usually get this far. The system doesn't expect us to. It's built to stop us before we even start. The judge was silent. Malik exhaled. I didn't get here by accident. I had to fight for it. I had to be twice as good, twice as fast, and make zero mistakes. And even then, people like you still doubt me the second I walk into the room. Judge Whitmore's face twitched. He wasn't used to being called out so directly. And yet, Malik continued, I just won a case in your courtroom, fair and square. Whitmore studied him for a long moment. Then, in a gruff voice, he muttered, You're good. Malik grinned. I know. The judge shook his head. Cocky. Malik chuckled. Confident. Judge Whitmore sighed, rubbing his temple. Get out of my courtroom, Turner. Malik gave a small salute. Gladly. He turned on his heel and strolled back toward the defense table, where Raymond Parker was still frozen in shock. As Malik helped his client gather his things, Judge Whitmore watched him go, shaking his head. The kid had embarrassed his courtroom, humiliated his prosecution, and yet, somewhere deep down, Whitmore felt something strange. Malik stepped out of the courthouse, greeted by a wave of flashing cameras and shouting reporters. Mr. Turner, how does it feel to be the youngest attorney to win a high-profile case? How did you even manage to get your law license at 16? What's next for you? Malik held up his hands, smirking. One question at a time, people. Raymond Parker, still shaken, grabbed Malik's arm. Kid, I don't know how to thank you. I thought my life was over. Malik smiled. No need to thank me, Mr. Parker. Just don't get caught near any more crime scenes. Raymond laughed for the first time in weeks. Malik turned back to the reporters, ready to answer more questions, until he spotted a man standing near the courthouse steps, watching him intently. Tall, expensive grey suit, sunglasses even though it wasn't sunny. Malik's smirk faded. The man gave him a slow nod, then pulled out a phone and spoke into it before walking away. Malik's gut told him something. Winning this case had put him in the spotlight, and not everyone was happy about it. Malik's victory had made headlines by nightfall. Teen genius attorney shocks the courtroom. 16-year-old lawyer wins impossible case. Who is Malik Turner? Social media was exploding with his name. Some called him a prodigy, others a fraud. But Malik didn't care about the noise. He was used to proving people wrong. What concerned him was the man in the grey suit. After leaving the courthouse, Malik couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. He had checked his surroundings, even doubled back once, but saw nothing. Still, his instincts told him that someone wasn't happy about his win. And he was right. Elsewhere, in a dimly lit office, a group of men sat around a long conference table, their faces grim. A large screen played the courtroom footage of Malik tearing apart the prosecution's case. At the head of the table sat Gerald Vaughan, a powerful district attorney with deep political connections. His jaw tightened as the footage showed Malik pointing out the tattoo. This kid just humiliated our system, Vaughan muttered, pausing the video. He made us look like fools. One of the men, a detective named Harris, scoffed. It was just one case, a fluke. Vaughan narrowed his eyes. A fluke? That fluke just proved we tried to put an innocent man behind bars. People are asking questions, and if they start digging deeper into other cases... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. The men exchanged uneasy glances. One of them spoke up. What do we do about him? Vaughan leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. We remind him that he's playing a dangerous game. A cold silence filled the room. They all understood what that meant. Meanwhile, Malik was walking home, hands in his pockets, his mind racing. He had no idea that in the shadows, someone was already watching him. Hummed overhead, casting long shadows on the pavement. He knew something was off. The man in the grey suit hadn't just been some random observer. Malik had seen too many courtroom games to ignore a look like that. Cold, calculating, and full of intent. He wasn't being paranoid. He was being watched. Malik turned down a side street, pretending to check his phone. He glanced at the reflection in a nearby shop window. There, a dark figure, about 50 feet behind him. They weren't in a rush, but they weren't casual either. Malik's heart picked up pace. He wasn't about to wait around and find out if this was a coincidence. Taking a sharp turn down an alley, he moved fast, weaving through the maze of dumpsters and side doors. He knew this neighborhood. Whoever was following him probably didn't. Then, suddenly, a hand clamped onto his shoulder. Malik twisted away instantly, his instincts kicking in. "Back off. Relax, kid." Malik turned to see a tall man in a dark leather jacket, his face shadowed under a low baseball cap. His stance was casual, but his presence carried weight. "You've made some powerful enemies." Malik steadied his breath. "That so?" The man nodded. "Your little courtroom stunt embarrassed the wrong people. People who don't like being embarrassed." Malik crossed his arms. "Let me guess. You're here to warn me?" The man tilted his head. "Something like that." He took a step closer. "You're smart, Malik. Smarter than most. But smart doesn't mean untouchable." Malik held his ground. "And what exactly happens if I don't back down?" The man sighed, almost like he didn't want to say it. "They'll come after you. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but they will make sure you never step foot in a courtroom again." Malik stared at him, reading his face. The guy wasn't bluffing, but Malik had spent his whole life defying expectations. "Tell them I don't scare easy." The man smirked slightly, like he expected that answer. He slipped something into Malik's hoodie pocket, a folded card. "If things get bad, call me." Before Malik could ask why, the man turned and disappeared into the night. Malik exhaled, unfolding the card. No name, just a number. His hands tightened around it. This wasn't just about winning cases anymore. This was war. Malik barely slept that night. The warning echoed in his mind. "They'll come after you." He wasn't naive. He had always known the system was corrupt, but he hadn't expected to be a target so soon. By morning, his name was everywhere. News outlets, podcasts, social media, all talking about the 16-year-old genius attorney who humiliated the justice system. But Malik knew better. Fame wasn't a shield, it was a spotlight. And spotlights make you an easy target. Meanwhile, across town, Gerald Vaughan watched the news in his office, his jaw tight. Malik was becoming a sensation. That wasn't part of the plan. He turned to Detective Harris. "I want him out." Harris nodded. "You want it done clean?" Vaughan exhaled. "No need for anything drastic. We just need to discredit him." He leaned forward, a slow smile creeping onto his face. "Find me something on him. A record, a scandal, a fake accusation, anything. If we can't beat him in the courtroom, we'll ruin him outside of it." Harris smirked. "Consider it done." Later that day, Malik was on his way to his office, a small rented space he used to prep cases, when he noticed something strange. A police car parked outside. 2 officers waiting by the entrance. His stomach tightened. As he approached, one of the officers stepped forward. "Malik Turner?" Malik kept his face calm. "Depends on who's asking." The officer smirked. "We have a few questions for you. Mind coming down to the station?" Malik's mind raced. He knew a setup when he saw one. He slid his hands into his hoodie pockets, gripping the card the mysterious man had given him the night before. He had a choice to make. Walk into the trap, or play the game his way? Malik forced a smirk, tilting his head at the officer. "Funny, the station usually sends a subpoena, not a street invitation." The officer's smile thinned. "Just a few questions, kid. We can do this the easy way or the hard way." Malik met his gaze unfazed. "Oh, I love a good multiple-choice question. But see, I know my rights. Am I being charged with something?" The second officer, a stocky man with sharp eyes, stepped forward. "Not yet." Malik let that sit for a second before chuckling. "Then we're done here." He moved to walk past them, but the stocky officer blocked his path. "Turner, let's not make this difficult." Malik took a slow breath, fingers brushing the card in his pocket. The warning from last night played in his head. "They're coming after you." "Fine, let's see how good they are at playing dirty." He pulled out his phone and, without breaking eye contact, pressed record. "Officers, am I free to go?" The stocky officer's jaw clenched. The first officer looked around, noticing the growing number of bystanders watching. A few had already started recording. Malik smiled. "Ah, looks like we're on camera. I'd love to answer your questions, but I'm busy being a law-abiding citizen. If you don't have a warrant or probable cause, I'll be on my way." The officers exchanged a look. They hadn't expected him to challenge them so boldly. After a tense beat, the first officer stepped back. "We'll be in touch." Malik flashed a grin, looking forward to it. They walked away, but he knew this wasn't over. Someone had sent them, and if they couldn't trap him legally, they'd come at him another way. His phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. "Nice move, but they won't stop. Be ready." Malik's stomach tightened. Game on. Malik didn't go straight home. Instead, he found a quiet cafe, ordered a black coffee, and stared at his phone. The unknown message was still on his screen. "Nice move, but they won't stop. Be ready." He debated calling the number on the card the mysterious man had given him. But before he could decide, another text came in, this one from his assistant, Tasha. "Tasha, Malik, we have a problem. Someone's leaking info about you." His jaw tightened. They were moving fast. He quickly texted back. "What kind of info?" "Check the news." Now, Malik immediately pulled up the latest headlines. Breaking news. Teen lawyer Malik Turner under investigation for academic fraud. His stomach dropped. He tapped on the article. Anonymous sources claim that Malik Turner's law degree may have been obtained through fraudulent means. Officials are now questioning the validity of his credentials. Could this so-called boy genius be nothing more than a con artist? Malik clenched his fists. They were trying to destroy his credibility. His phone buzzed again, another text from Tasha. "Tasha, the reporters are already calling. This is bad." Malik took a slow breath. He knew how the game was played. If people started believing the lie, his career, his entire future, would be over. He had two choices. Ignore it and let the media eat up the rumors. Get ahead of the story before it swallowed him whole. Malik wasn't one to play defense. He was going to fight back, and he knew exactly where to start. Malik's mind was already working 10 steps ahead. This wasn't just a smear campaign, it was an orchestrated takedown, and if they thought he'd roll over, they didn't know who they were dealing with. He dialed Tasha. She picked up on the first ring. "Please tell me you have a plan." Malik smirked. "You know I do." An hour later, the headlines were everywhere. News anchors debated his legitimacy. Social media was flooded with arguments. Some defended him, but others were quick to believe the worst. But Malik had set his own trap. He stepped in front of his phone, went live on his social media, and faced the camera with calm confidence. "Let's talk about the truth." Within minutes, tens of thousands of viewers joined. "The system didn't expect someone like me to win, so now they're trying to discredit me. Let's break it down." He pulled up his official degree and bar certification on the screen. Everything was legitimate. Then, he showed an email he had just received, accidentally leaked. It was from Gerald Vaughan's office. The subject line? "Destroy Malik Turner." The message? A list of tactics to frame him. Malik smiled at the camera. "I don't cheat, I don't lie, but they do. And now we have proof." The internet exploded. Expose Vaughan started trending. Journalists pounced. Politicians demanded answers. And in a high-rise office across town, Gerald Vaughan watched in fury as his own trap backfired. Malik Turner had just turned the tables. Gerald Vaughan's office was in chaos. Phones rang non-stop. His assistant looked panicked. Reporters were waiting outside, and on every screen in the room, Malik Turner's live video was playing. "I don't cheat. I don't lie. But they do, and now we have proof." The leaked email had detonated like a bomb. Vaughan had been exposed. Harris, the detective who helped orchestrate the smear campaign, slammed a fist on the desk. "This kid just ruined us." Vaughan, his face red with fury, grabbed his phone and dialed a number. "Shut this down. Now." "Too late," the voice on the other end replied. "The governor just launched an investigation. You're finished." Vaughan's stomach dropped. He had spent years manipulating the system, burying people who got in his way. But he had underestimated Malik. And now, the entire city was watching his downfall in real time. Meanwhile, Malik sat back in his chair, watching the fallout. News stations were calling for Vaughan's resignation. The police department had launched an internal review, and his own name was being cleared. Tasha burst into his office, out of breath. "You did it!" Malik smirked. "No, we did it." For years, people had doubted him. They said he was too young, too black, too different, but he had proven them all wrong. And this was just the beginning. Because Malik Turner wasn't just a courtroom prodigy anymore, he was a force to be reckoned with. The end.